They charged me $450 for unauthorized parking in my own driveway. When I showed them the deed line that proved it was on my parcel, the HOA president smirked and said, "Our rules override your map." That was the moment I decided to learn how their rules actually worked. Welcome to my channel. I'm Dan Mercer, a civil engineer out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and I tell true stories of HOA overreach and what happens when you fight back the lawful way. If you're watching from another state, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this community of homeowners stretches across America. It started last spring, a humid April morning when my daughter Ella was chalking flowers on the driveway. A tow truck idled at the curb, diesel coughing. The driver had a clipboard, eyes scanning plates. My blue Mustang, 69, restored with my late brother, was the target. The HOA said it violated aesthetic continuity. I said it was a car. They said it was storage. When I asked for a written citation, they pointed at my kid's chalk art and told me to clean it up before inspection day. I'd moved here 2 years prior, buying the cul-de-sac house after my brother Mark's accident. He left me the Mustang, the one thing that still felt like family. Losing him to a scaffolding collapse taught me precision matters, bolts, load limits, signatures. I wasn't about to let a neighborhood committee erase what was left of him with a form letter. 3 days later came a certified envelope, $450 fine, payable within 10 business days. They cited Rule 7.4, exterior storage of inoperable vehicles. I'd driven that Mustang to work that morning. I sent photos, time-stamped at 8:12 a.m., tailpipe smoke visible. The board responded with silence, then doubled the fine for non-compliance. My neighbor, Mrs. Hendricks, knocked that evening. 82, retired librarian, heart like warm bread. She handed me a binder of old meeting minutes and whispered, "You're not the first." Her son's trailer had been towed last year, wrong address on the notice. They paid $200 to recover it. She said, "They bank on exhaustion, not justice." That night, I read until 2 a.m. through CCRs, Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, filed 1998, amended 2011. Section 7.4 had been added in 2015 without county registration. Knowledge nugget number 1. An HOA rule isn't enforceable unless properly recorded with the county registrar. If it's not stamped, it's noise. I printed the registry page, date stamped, blank where their amendment should have been. Then I built a spreadsheet. Every fine in the last 2 years, by amount and household. 92 total, $38,450 collected. A pattern appeared. Cars, paint colors, fences, same 7 families, same enforcement officer, their president, Paul Weston. Paul liked to quote bylaws like scripture. "Order keeps property values high," he said at every meeting. Maybe. But order without oversight breeds something worse than chaos. It breeds entitlement. I walked past his house one night, quiet, the glow of a kitchen light showing stacks of paper on his counter. I wondered how many checks from neighbors lay inside those envelopes. The next morning, a final notice was taped to my door. Red ink, bold letters, $900 due or lien initiation within 30 days. My daughter asked if we were moving. I said, "Not yet, kiddo. First, we measure the battlefield." By Sunday, I had GPS-tagged photos of every supposed violation lot, side by side with county parcel maps. Half their citations overlapped city easements, land the HOA couldn't touch. It wasn't just greed, it was ignorance dressed in authority. And ignorance can be corrected. I spent Monday at City Hall, 3rd floor, permitting and land use. The receptionist pointed me toward a filing cabinet that smelled of toner and dust. Parcel 14B matched my address. Right there, in black ink, driveway, private, not HOA maintained. That single sentence was worth more than every dollar of their fines. I took a photo with the date showing on the clerk's computer screen. When I returned home, Paul Weston was already waiting, leaning on my mailbox like he owned the air. "You've been asking around," he said. His voice had that fake civility of someone who rehearses intimidation. "You'll find we have jurisdiction you don't understand." I told him, "Maybe, but I read better than I'm told." He smiled thinly, dropped a folded paper in my hand, and walked off. It was a notice of intent to tow, dated tomorrow, 8 o'clock a.m. That night, I called an old friend, Miguel Alvarez, a property attorney who'd once defended a small condo board in Cary. He laughed when I explained the situation. They forgot that HOAs aren't governments, Dan. They can't create police power out of boredom. He asked for copies of everything. I scanned every page, every timestamp, and labeled them by exhibit number like a court file. The next morning, I made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon upright. At 7:55, a tow truck rolled up. Rust, dented fender, no company insignia. The driver avoided eye contact. Weston followed behind in his SUV, clipboard ready. I stood beside the Mustang with my phone camera running. "Sir," Weston said, "you've been given notice. Please step aside." I asked the driver for his tow permit number. He froze. "Show me your authorization," I said. Weston cut in. "We don't need city authorization." That's when I dialed the non-emergency police line, quoted the city ordinance number Miguel had texted me. Section 6, 127. Unauthorized tow operations without municipal reg. Istration subject to impound. When two officers arrived, Weston's smile curdled. They asked for paperwork. The driver admitted he was helping a friend. The officer's pen clicked twice, then scribbled a citation. Weston tried to explain private enforcement authority. The cop just said, "Authority doesn't override law." The crowd of neighbors had grown, phones out, murmuring. Someone whispered, "About time." The officer turned to me, nodded and said, "Your vehicle stays put, sir." Then he radioed for a tow, for the tow truck. That was the first time Weston looked scared. Later, Miguel called. "Document everything. They'll retaliate. They always do." He was right. Within a week, I got 3 new citations. Mailbox paint chipping, overheight grass, 2.5 in, and trash receptacle visible from curb. None true. I started logging every visit, every note, every photo. I bought a small body cam, legal in North Carolina's one-party consent law. Knowledge nugget number 2, recording in a one-party consent state is lawful if you're a participant in the conversation. Midway through June, Mrs. Hendricks found a notice taped to her door too. Failure to prune rose bushes. She hadn't missed a meeting in 5 years. She looked at me with watery eyes and said, "They're punishing anyone who claps for you." I promised her, "We'll make it count." If you've ever lived under an HOA that forgets it's supposed to serve, not rule, tell me below. What was your breaking point? Or if you're one of the few good ones, share what your board does right. Maybe someone watching from another neighborhood will learn how to stand tall instead of stay quiet. 2 nights later, I found an anonymous envelope under my doormat. No return, just a printout of an internal HOA email chain. Weston had written, "Mercer's driveway is ours by easement. Confirm with developer archives." The reply beneath said, "No easement recorded." That was it, the thread I'd been waiting for. The original developer had dissolved in 2007. If the HOA had never recorded their easement transfer, they didn't own a square inch of asphalt beyond the curb. The rights still belong to the dissolved LLC's asset file, now managed by a holding company in Charlotte. I emailed Miguel, "If I buy that asset, what happens?" He replied 5 minutes later, "You'd control the easement they think they own," quietly. That night, I sat with the glow of the laptop, LLC forms open, my daughter asleep upstairs. I thought of Mark, of the car we built, of neighbors too tired to fight. I filed the paperwork under Cul-de-sac Holdings LLC. The transfer fee was $312. Weston's empire had a hidden fault line, and I had just bought the ground beneath it. By the time the assignment of rights cleared, June 28, 9:42 a.m., I held a legally recorded claim over the disputed driveway easement and 2 adjoining access strips totaling 612 square feet. I printed the stamped record from the county clerk's website, slipped it into a clear binder, and tucked it under my arm like a secret weapon I wasn't ready to show. I spent that evening walking the block. The sprinkler hissed across the Hendricks lawn, cicadas droned in the maples, and porch lights flickered on one by one. I wasn't planning a war exactly, just a correction. When authority drifts too far from service, sometimes you have to drag it back with paperwork. Miguel called to confirm the title chain. The HOA never assumed maintenance of that parcel. You own the access rights now. Keep quiet until they overcommit. I asked, "How quiet?" He said, "Let them dig their own trench." So I waited. Over the next week, Weston's board escalated. A letter arrived claiming my continued non-compliance would trigger a lien on July 15th. Another neighbor, Tyree from Lot 18, got cited for a basketball hoop that had been there since his twins were toddlers. Mrs. Hendricks received a $200 fine for excessive porch decor. She had one wind chime. I started collecting testimonies, emails, voicemails, meeting minutes from 2021 through 2023. Each document went into a numbered folder, 1 through 47. Knowledge nugget, number 3. Selective enforcement, when rules are applied inconsistently, is grounds for invalidation under most state HOA statutes. I highlighted every instance where Weston's friends' violations were ignored. At night, I drafted a timeline. April 12th, first citation. May 2nd, false tow attempt. May 19th, retaliatory citations begin. June 28th, easement rights acquired. July 15th, threatened lien deadline. 12 weeks total. Enough rope for anyone to hang themselves. Still, it wasn't just about me. I met with 3 neighbors in my garage, the smell of oil and coffee thick in the air. Tyree brought printouts of his correspondence. Mrs. Hendricks carried a thermos of chamomile. We formed a quiet coalition, the Driveway Group. "Why not call the media?" Tyree asked. "Because headlines fade," I said. "Documents don't." The plan was to gather proof of mismanagement beyond fines, bank accounts, insurance policies, maintenance invoices. We suspected Weston had been authorizing payments to a landscaping company owned by his cousin. If we could trace funds, we'd show conflict of interest, a term auditors treat like blood in the water. I sent a public records request to the county ethics office for Weston's filings as a licensed property manager. The clerk said it'd take 10 business days. 10 days fit perfectly inside my countdown to July 15th. By July 8th, the HOA newsletter hit every mailbox. It featured my name on page 2 under chronic violators, warning residents to uphold community standards. A smear printed in color. My daughter tore it up before I could stop her. "They can't call you that," she said. I hugged her. "They can print what they want, but soon they'll have to read what I file." Late that night, rain hammered the gutters. I opened the garage door just enough to hear it while I organized binders on the workbench. Visual beat number 1 formed right there, a violation notice curling in the flame of an old coffee can. Not evidence destruction, just a copy, a symbol. Watching it crumple into ash felt like drawing a line between anger and purpose. As dawn broke, Miguel texted, "Got the ethics filings. Conflict confirmed. Payment trail exists. Wait for the board meeting. Use your leverage then." And that's when it clicked. The annual HOA meeting, July 14th, one day before their lien threat, was open to all homeowners. They planned to vote on a specialized enforcement fund. I'd be there, binder in hand, ownership deed ready, cameras rolling. Before that day came, I wanted to hear from others who'd faced something similar. Do you think an HOA should have the power to tow from a private driveway, or should that fall strictly under city code? Drop your answer. What's fair in your state? On July 10th, Weston posted another memo. Unauthorized gatherings violate HOA assembly rules. He was referring to our garage meetings. We met anyway. The sound of rainwater dripping off the rafters mixed with Mrs. Hendricks's soft laugh. "He's losing control," she said. "Not yet," I replied, sliding the new deed across the table. "But he's about to kick it so." The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. The house hummed with the refrigerator's low drone and the faint rattle of the air vent. I walked outside barefoot onto the concrete driveway that had caused all this chaos. The air was thick with July heat. I ran my palm along the fender of the Mustang. Smooth, cold, like a promise sealed in metal. This wasn't just asphalt and paint anymore. It was a lesson about ownership, about how power hides in the fine print. At exactly 6:58 p.m. on July 14th, I walked into the HOA clubhouse. Rows of plastic chairs faced a long folding table where Weston sat, flanked by his loyal board. 3 members in matching navy blazers, nameplates gleaming. A projector screen glowed behind them with the agenda, Item 3, Approval of Special Enforcement Fund, Vote Required. Neighbors murmured, shuffling papers, pretending to read. I caught sight of Mrs. Hendricks in the second row, hands folded neatly, her binder resting on her lap. Tyree gave me a small nod. Weston started the meeting with his usual preamble. Community standards are the backbone of our property values. Without consistent enforcement, we risk decline. His tone dripped with rehearsed authority. Then he leaned forward, voice tightening. Some residents believe they can challenge this process in ways that undermine community order. He didn't say my name, but his eyes did. When the floor opened for comments, I raised my hand. Weston hesitated. He had to call on me. "Mr. Mercer," he said, tight smile. "You have 3 minutes." I walked up, binder under my arm. "Appreciate it. I'll be brief." I placed the binder on the table and flipped it open. The first page showed the county's stamped record. On June 28th, Cul-de-sac Holdings LLC, an entity I manage, acquired the easement rights for the parcels this HOA has been citing. Here's the deed, recorded with Wake County, page 312. Murmur rippled through the room. Weston's face paled. "That means," I continued, "the HOA has been issuing fines and threatening liens on land it doesn't own, under a rule not recorded with the county. I've confirmed this with both the registrar and my attorney." I handed copies to the board. Paper slid across the table like small explosions. Weston tried to recover. "You can't just... This is a procedural misunderstanding. The association maintains those areas." "Maintains, sure," I said. "Owns? Not legally. And any enforcement on unowned property violates Section 47F3-102 of the North Carolina Planned Community Act." Miguel had drilled me to quote it exactly, and the effect was immediate. A low whistle from the back row. I added, "Since your enforcement letters reference my driveway, now under my easement ownership, any further entry constitutes trespass. I've already filed notice with the city inspector." That line landed hard. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights. Weston's voice cracked. "You think you can scare us with paperwork?" "No," I said evenly. "Paperwork is what scared me first. I just learned to read it better." Silence. Then Mrs. Hendricks stood and spoke in her soft librarian tone. "I move that item 3 be postponed pending legal review." The room buzzed with whispered seconds. The vote went to paper slips. When Weston collected them, his hands trembled. The result, 11 in favor of postponement, 9 against. His motion failed. Outside, the humidity clung like static. Tyree clapped me on the shoulder. "You just bought his rule book out from under him." "Not yet," I said. "Tomorrow's lien deadline still stands. That's when it ends." Before midnight, Weston posted on the community forum accusing me of fraudulent filings. I printed every word. Knowledge nugget number 4. Defamation within HOA communications can trigger insurer liability when mad. He under official capacity. His insurer would read those screenshots soon enough. If you were sitting in that room, hearing an HOA president justify power he didn't have, would you confront him publicly, or wait for legal proof first? Tell me how you'd have handled it, or at least like the video if you think I chose right. At 8 a.m. the next morning, a white envelope arrived by certified mail. Notice of lien filing, dated July 15th, signed by Weston. My hands didn't even shake as I read it. He'd just crossed from arrogance into illegality. I called Miguel. He filed the lien anyway. Miguel's voice sharpened. "Good. Now it's falsification of record. We can bring in the registrar and city inspector. Get ready for a show." I printed one last copy of the easement deed and slid it into a folder labeled Set Piece. My Mustang gleamed in the driveway, sunlight bouncing off the hood. Tomorrow, at the emergency hearing Weston had demanded, he'd learn exactly who owned the ground he was standing on. The community hearing was scheduled for July 16th at 10 a.m. in the small county municipal building, the same tan brick hall where dog licenses and marriage certificates were issued. The irony wasn't lost on me. Both required more accountability than the HOA had ever shown. I arrived early, binder in one hand, a thermos of black coffee in the other. Inside, rows of folding chairs lined the room, the air humming with the old ceiling fan's wobble. Weston and his board occupied the front, whispering with their attorney, a pale man with thin wire glasses who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The city inspector, a heavy-set woman named Carla Ricks, sat to one side with her clipboard. She'd reviewed my easement documents 2 days earlier and confirmed the property lines. I took my seat behind Mrs. Hendricks and Tyree. My phone buzzed. Miguel's text. Stay calm. Stick to the record. At exactly 10, the clerk called the hearing to order. Weston spoke first, reading a statement about non-compliant residents undermining community harmony. Then, with that same performative tone, he held up a photo of my driveway. This resident has refused repeated orders to comply, obstructing enforcement necessary for the community's aesthetic and safety standards. Carla cleared her throat. Before we proceed, I need to note for the record that this driveway falls outside HOA jurisdiction, per parcel file 14B, and recorded assignment dated June 28th. That document supersedes HOA enforcement. You could feel the air snap. Weston blinked fast. That's incorrect. The HOA has maintained that strip for 20 years. Maintenance isn't ownership, Carla replied. You can mow a park. That doesn't make it yours. The audience chuckled. Weston's lawyer whispered frantically, but Weston pushed on. We'll contest that filing in civil court if necessary. Carla looked unimpressed. You can, but as of today, any lien or citation on that parcel constitutes misuse of authority. My office will forward a copy of this finding to county records. I stood, calm, binder in hand. Then I'll submit this. I laid out the HOA newsletter where Weston had labeled me a chronic violator, alongside his internal email leak referring to easement confusion. The contradictions stacked like bricks. This pattern shows bad faith and retaliation. Carla nodded, taking photos of each page for the file. Noted. Weston's voice rose. You're manipulating the system. I replied, I'm following it. You're the one skipping pages. That was when the officer from the previous tow incident entered. Officer Daniels, same Navy uniform, same slow stride. He nodded at me, then addressed the clerk. For the record, I have an incident report involving unauthorized tow attempt by a party contracted by this HOA. The vehicle owner was in compliance with local ordinances. It was over before Weston realized it. Carla signed off on the hearing minutes, stamped them with the county seal. Case dismissed. Enforcement actions rescinded. Visual beat number 2 burned itself into my mind. The red paid stamp Carla used. Inking, slamming, lifting, echoing like a gavel. Outside, the summer air felt electric. Reporters from a local blog had shown up after a tip from Tyree's niece. Cameras clicked, and Weston ducked behind his car. I didn't smile for the photos. This wasn't revenge. It was record correction. By sunset, the HOA forum exploded. Threads of resignation talk, budget questions, refund demands. The insurer requested clarification on Weston's public defamation. The treasurer quietly removed herself from the group chat. 2 days later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No logo, just a single sheet of paper. Effective immediately. Paul Weston resigns as HOA president. If your board tried to tow your car off your own property, would you stop at proving them wrong or push for accountability too? Tell me below. I'm curious how far you'd go for the principle of it. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Winning a hearing isn't fixing a system. It only exposes the cracks. The real battle, the reform, hadn't started. Weston's allies still held 2 board seats, and the bylaws gave them power to appoint replacements. I needed to turn my leverage, the easement ownership, into something bigger, something permanent. Miguel called that evening. Now's your moment. Offer them a deal that benefits everyone. Make them think they're choosing peace. What kind of deal? Reform, he said simply. Term limits, transparency, community oversight. They need your signature to release the easement maintenance back. Trade it. I stood by the window, watching porch lights flicker across the street. It was time to plan the second reversal, the kind that changes the future, not just the file. By Friday morning, word of Weston's resignation spread faster than summer humidity. Cars slowed in front of my driveway, neighbors waving, some giving small nods of quiet gratitude. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. No more late-night knocks, no envelopes taped to doors. Still, I knew better than to mistake silence for resolution. Miguel called while I was sanding the Mustang's hood. You ready for phase 2? He asked. Depends on how loud it gets, I said. It'll get loud, he chuckled. Good reforms always do. The HOA board had called an emergency session for July 21st to reassign maintenance and oversight duties of the community parcels. It was their way of baiting me to relinquish my easement rights quietly. Instead, I drafted my own proposal, a memorandum of transfer and reform, 10 pages, clean and lawful. It laid out exact terms. Term limits. No board member may serve more than 2 consecutive years. Transparency. All expenditures over $1,000 to be posted on the public HOA portal within 7 days. Audit. Annual third-party review of financials, publicly accessible. Open records. Residents may inspect minutes within 5 business days of request. Fee rollback. Reduce enforcement fees by 25% for 12 months to refund overcollection. And the kicker, the HOA would regain maintenance rights to the easement only after signing the reform charter. Reversal number 1 had been the leverage, the ownership nobody expected. Reversal number 2 would be the trade, the reform they couldn't refuse. Miguel reviewed it, added one line at the bottom, executed in good faith for the benefit of all homeowners. Then he said, "Now make them sign it on record, July 21st, 6:00 p.m. The clubhouse smelled of fresh coffee and fear. The interim president, a mild man named Gary Bell, opened the meeting with an apology to the community. "We want to move forward," he said, "but we need cooperation." I raised my hand, walked up front, and laid my folder on the podium. "You'll have it, under new rules." Gasps and whispers. I lid copies of the memorandum to each board member. "This document restores your easement maintenance rights in exchange for transparent governance. Sign this, and the HOA becomes accountable to the people it represents." Gary read quickly, eyes wide at the audit clause. "This would require open posting of all payments?" "Yes," I said. "That's called sunlight." Weston's old ally, Diane, muttered, "This is extortion by paperwork." "No," I replied calm. "It's ownership by record, the same kind you used against us." Officer Daniels stood in the back, off-duty but present as a neutral witness at my request. His presence was enough to keep the tone civil. Gary looked at the crowd. "If we agree, what happens to your easement?" "It transfers back immediately, recorded same day. Everyone wins." After a tense pause, he signed. Diane hesitated, then followed. The pen scratches were the sound of power changing hands. Visual beat number 3 locked in my memory, a pen clattering onto a wooden table under fluorescent light. As the papers were notarized, a slow clap began from the back row. Mrs. Hendricks stood, eyes wet, whispering, "It's over, dear." That night, Tyree grilled burgers for the whole block. Kids rode bikes without worrying about mailbox inspections. Someone taped the reform charter to the clubhouse window under the headline, "Accountability Adopted." If you've ever dreamed of your community running for people instead of against them, tell me in the comments what one reform you'd make first. Transparency? Term limits? Fee fairness? Or just decent neighbors again? Later, I sat on my porch with a beer, the Mustang glinting under the streetlight. My daughter came out in her pajamas, holding the old final notice I'd saved. "Can we burn this one too?" she asked. "Not this time," I said. "We'll keep it as proof we didn't just win. We fixed it." In the weeks that followed, the dominoes fell quietly but completely. The HOA, this insurer, canceled Weston's director's coverage pending investigation. The city ethics board cited him for undisclosed family contracting. Refund checks totaling $11,300 went to overcharged residents. The reform charter was filed with the county clerk on August 3rd, 2:17 p.m. The neighborhood held its first community day that weekend. Free food, music, no speeches. Mrs. Hendricks taught kids how to stamp library cards for fun. Tyree raffled basketballs for the new half-court he'd helped fund with refund money. I looked at the Mustang, at the house Mark never got to see finished, and whispered, "We kept it standing, brother. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future stories reach you first. As citizens, sharing these lessons is how we make sure power answers to people, not the other way around." By September, County News printed a short line in the local column. Sunset Oaks HOA adopts new transparency charter after internal audit and member-led reform. No one mentioned my name. That was fine. The light was enough. One night, under the porch lamp, I placed the last binder, evidence, letters, photos, into a fireproof box labeled "Case Closed." Then I locked it, heard the latch click, and smiled. Because somewhere, another board was already overreaching, and someone else would need to know exactly how to fight back. By early October, reform had settled into routine. Financials were public, minutes uploaded within a week, and the HOA forum had gone from a battleground to a bulletin board for lost pets and bake sales. But victory has a strange aftertaste. It's quiet, like a storm that forgot to end. I kept the easement deed framed above my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of how simple lines on paper could cage or free entire neighborhoods. Sometimes Ella would ask, "Why keep it if you gave it back?" I'd answer, "Because proof is what keeps peace honest." Then, on an overcast Tuesday, I received an email from the county clerk. Public inquiry from State Insurance Compliance Division. Request for interview re-HOA claim records. Apparently, the insurer had flagged irregularities in past reimbursements filed under Weston's term. He wasn't done paying the bill, not yet. Miguel joined me on a video call later that night. "This could become a civil restitution case," he said. "You might be called as a witness." "Good," I replied. "Maybe it'll stick in someone's training manual." That weekend, I helped Gary, now acting president, host the community's first open forum. Folding chairs in a semicircle on the lawn, microphones powered by a portable speaker, kids running around with lemonade. No gavel, no lectern, just neighbors. Tyree opened with a joke about Weston installing speed bumps for ego control. The laughter felt cleansing. Still, Gary asked me privately, "How did you stay so composed through all that?" I told him, "Because fury burns fast, documentation lasts forever." At sunset, Mrs. Hendricks approached, clutching a manila folder. "You should have this," she said. Inside were handwritten notes from every meeting she'd attended since 2010, dozens of pages, tidy cursive. "For the record," she smiled, "so no one forgets how we got here." I flipped through them and saw an entry dated years before I moved in. "Board ignores vote, passes special assessment anyway." Same patterns, just new faces. It made me realize the story wasn't about a single man or rule. It was about teaching the next person where to look. Later, I posted an update to the channel. When a system hides behind complexity, learn its language. You don't need anger, you need evidence. It went viral overnight. Thousands of comments, people sharing their own HOA horror stories and small victories. If you've ever had to fight for something as basic as peace in your own home, you know this feeling. Tell me, what's the first thing you'd reform if your HOA handed you the gavel? Term limits, audits, or maybe just a little empathy? Weeks passed, and news finally broke. Weston pled to 2 misdemeanor counts: misrepresentation of authority and misuse of funds. Fines, probation, barred from serving on any HOA board for 5 years. Carla, the city inspector, called me after reading the notice. "Sometimes the system works," she said. "Takes a few stubborn souls to remind it how." I laughed. "Guess that makes us stubborn." She replied, "No, documented." That winter, I watched the neighborhood transform. Kids' bikes left out overnight without fines, porch lights twinkling past curfew, laughter spilling across driveways that used to be battlegrounds, the sound of normal life returning. One evening, while helping Tyree repaint his mailbox, the same one they'd once cited, he looked over and asked, "You ever think about joining the new board?" I smiled, rolling paint slow and steady. "Nah, I'd rather stay the guy who checks the paperwork." But deep down, I knew I wasn't done. Justice wasn't about standing at the podium. It was about making sure nobody else had to. When I locked my garage that night, the metal latch clicked like punctuation, a clean ending. Or maybe a comma. Somewhere out there, another HOA was overstepping, another family documenting, another story waiting to be told. The first frost came early that year. You could smell it in the air, sharp, metallic, the way it gets before winter flattens the lawns. The neighborhood still held the echo of summer laughter, but now there was peace in the quiet. Even the HOA bulletin board looked different. No red warnings, no citations, just a printed flyer for Community Chili Night. I hadn't posted a new video in weeks, partly because I didn't want to turn victory into spectacle. Partly because I'd been busy helping neighbors with things that finally mattered. Wheelchair ramps, a shared tool shed, even repainting the playground fence. Reform was paperwork on paper, but in practice, it was kids laughing, and no one calling them violations. One Saturday morning, Gary stopped by holding a small cardboard box. Inside was a brass plaque engraved, "For documentation, not destruction. In gratitude, the homeowners of Sunset Oaks." I laughed. "You're making me sound like a court clerk." He grinned. "You taught us that's not an insult." Later, the county paper ran a follow-up piece. Sunset Oaks residents establish independent ethics committee. Beneath it was a photo of Mrs. Hendricks sitting beside the new treasurer, her wind chime visible behind her. It caught the sunlight just enough to look like a medal. That same afternoon, I took Ella to the park. She pointed at the new basketball court Tyree had helped fund and said, "This is where the bad rules used to win, right?" "Not anymore," I said. "Now it's where we practice playing fair." Before we left, I recorded one final segment for the channel. No drama, no soundtrack, just truth. If you've followed this story, you know what started it. A driveway, a car, a man who thought power meant control. But here's the thing. Power isn't what you keep. It's what you return once you've fixed it. If I've done this right, no one will ever need another story like mine. I paused, watching the camera's red light blink. If you believe this is how community should work, lawful, transparent, kind, say a few words below for someone who might need courage. Subscribe if you want the next one to find you first. And if you've learned something here, share it. That's on us. I closed the laptop, exhaled slow. The following week, a letter arrived from the state ombuds's office confirming the consent decree between the HOA and the county. The new charter would remain binding for 10 years, with annual review. It ended with one simple line: filed and acknowledged without objection. That night, I stood on the porch, coffee steaming in the cold, and watched the streetlights flicker on. The Mustang sat under its cover, safe, quiet. I could almost hear Mark's laugh from years ago when we first turned that engine over, something between pride and mischief. "Guess we did all right," I said softly to the night. The world won't remember names from small neighborhoods, but it will feel their echoes. A fair vote, a quiet driveway, a child's chalk drawing left untouched. And somewhere, maybe next county over, another homeowner will open a certified envelope, frown at the fine, and decide, no, not this time. When they do, I hope they find this story and know exactly where to start.